I remember the exact moment when a verse hit me harder than any applause ever had. It wasn't dramatic or loud, just sudden and undeniable, like something I'd been running from finally caught up to me, and it didn't ask permission before sitting in my chest. I was alone in a hotel room, lights low, phone face down, no stage, no cameras, no audience to perform for, just me and the version of myself I avoided meeting. The silence felt louder than any crowd I'd ever faced. For years, I had filled rooms with laughter and confidence. I spoke like a man who knew exactly where he was going. But in that quiet, I realized how much of that certainty was borrowed. Without noise, I didn't know who I was supposed to be. The crowd never shook me. Pressure never shook me. Failure never shook me the way that silence did, because silence doesn't clap and it doesn't lie. That's when the verse appeared in my mind, slow and heavy. And what is the life of this world except play and diversion? It didn't accuse me, but it exposed me. Like a mirror I couldn't turn away from. Everything I had built suddenly felt weighty, not impressive. Achievements I once carried with pride now felt like luggage. Not useless, just temporary, fragile, unfinished. As if they were asking me what I thought they were worth. I had what people call success. Titles, recognition, doors that opened on command. But peace wasn't waiting behind any of them. And that absence hurt more than struggle ever did. I realized I'd mastered being seen, but never learned how to be still. I knew how to win rooms, not how to quiet my own heart. The applause had trained me to move forward without listening, and now listening was unavoidable. That truth didn't inspire me. It didn't motivate me. It crushed something I thought I needed to survive. And strangely, that breaking felt necessary, because once that illusion cracked, I could finally admit it. I wasn't as in control as I pretended to be. The strength I trusted had limits I never acknowledged, and that was the moment the real story began. I always believed that if I could master the stage, I could master life. If I could control the room, the timing, the laughter, then nothing could touch me. Confidence became my currency, and performance became my shield. I told myself that this was strength. Laughter felt like safety to me. Every smile from the crowd felt like proof that I mattered. I treated scripts like armor, rehearsed and polished, so nothing could get through. And fame slowly became my evidence that I belonged somewhere. Before all of that, I worked job after job, chasing stability with tired hands. I was fired more times than I care to count, each time swallowing pride. There were nights I slept in my car, staring at the ceiling, holding onto a suitcase. Dreams were all I owned, and even those felt fragile. In those years, hunger taught me discipline. Rejection taught me persistence. I told myself that struggle was shaping me for something greater, but deep down it was also teaching me fear. I chased success with everything I had, not just ambition, but desperation. I believed that if I could make the world laugh, I'd never feel small again. That if they applauded, my doubts would finally be quiet. When success came, it arrived loudly. Doors opened that once felt permanently locked. People knew my name, trusted my voice, expected my confidence. From the outside, it looked like I had arrived. But success didn't settle my heart. It kept me alert, restless, always guarding what I gained. The higher I climbed, the more I feared falling, and that fear never slept. Every opportunity felt like something I could lose. Every mistake felt like a threat to everything I'd built. I smiled, but I was constantly calculating. Control became my obsession, not my peace. I told myself this tension was normal, that pressure meant growth and fear meant relevance. But the truth was simpler and heavier. I didn't trust anything that could disappear. The stage gave me power I couldn't find anywhere else. Up there, I decided the rhythm, the silence, the release. People listened when I spoke, responded when I paused. For a moment, everything felt ordered, but the moment I stepped off, that order collapsed. No lights, no cues, no laughter to guide me, just my thoughts, unfiltered and relentless, and I had no script for them. That's when I realized how much I relied on noise. noise to distract me from questions I avoided, noise to convince me I was steady. Silence felt like exposure. The control I thought I had was conditional. It only existed when the world was watching. When no one was there, it vanished completely. And that terrified me more than failure ever did. I began to see that control was an illusion I clung to, a fragile structure built on approval and routine. It looked solid from far away, but close up it trembled, and I was standing right in the middle of it. That realization didn't break me all at once. It unsettled me slowly and persistently. It prepared me for a moment when everything would stop working, a moment when control would finally let go of me. The breaking point didn't come with a headline or a public apology. It wasn't one moment people could point to and say, that's when it fell apart. From the outside, everything still looked intact, but inside, something essential had already cracked. I had survived embarrassment before. I had survived criticism, mockery, even public mistakes. Those things sting, but they pass. This felt different, quieter, deeper, harder to escape. What shook me was a simple realization I couldn't argue with anymore. Applause always ends. Trends move on without asking permission, and crowds eventually find someone new to cheer for. When the noise faded, I was still there, not the version people recognized, but the one left behind. No lights, no laughter, no role to play, just the self, standing alone, unintroduced. I had given nearly 3 decades to a craft that defined me. It fed me, carried me, and gave me a sense of worth. People didn't just recognize my work, they expected it from me. It became my identity before I noticed it happening. Walking away from that world wasn't a bold decision. It was reluctant, heavy, and filled with grief. The environment had changed, hardened, turned sharp at the edges. What once felt alive now felt hostile to my spirit. I told myself I was just adapting, that it was about culture shifting, about timing, about fear. Those explanations sounded reasonable when I said them out loud, but they never settled my heart. The truth was more uncomfortable than any public criticism. I didn't know who I was without the role I played, without the expectations, the routine, the validation, and that scared me more than starting over ever had. I had spent years being introduced before I spoke. Now there was no introduction, no context. Just my own thoughts asking questions I avoided, questions about purpose, value, and direction. Losing the craft didn't hurt as much as losing myself inside it. I realized how much of my worth I tied to being needed, to being relevant, visible, applauded. Without that, I felt strangely invisible to myself. I started to feel hollow in quiet moments, like I was wearing a name that no longer fit. I'd achieved so much, yet felt undefined. Success hadn't prepared me for this emptiness. That's when I understood what the real loss was. Not income, not recognition, not routine. It was identity. The story I told myself about who I was. And without it, I felt exposed. I tried to outrun that feeling by staying busy, but silence has patience, and it always catches up. Every quiet night pressed the same question into my chest. If all of this is gone, then who am I? That question followed me everywhere, into rooms where I used to feel powerful, into moments that should have felt satisfying. It refused to be ignored. The crisis wasn't loud, but it was relentless. It stripped away distractions one by one until I was left with nothing to hide behind. And that was when the real confrontation began. Then came the verse quietly without ceremony, not shouted, not framed, not delivered to impress. It arrived the way truth usually does, uninvited and unavoidable. And it didn't ask me how successful I was before speaking. It wasn't a motivational line meant to push me forward. It was an ayat, heavy and precise. Whoever turns away from my remembrance, I felt like it was speaking directly to what I'd been avoiding. The words didn't accuse me, but they exposed me. Indeed, he will have a depressed life. Not poor, not broken, not defeated, depressed. That single word settled into places I kept hidden. Something inside me cracked open when I let that sink in. Not my career, not my reputation. See, my defenses. I realized how busy I'd been staying distracted, how little time I'd spent being present with my own heart. I saw my ego for what it really was. Not confidence, but fear wearing confidence's face, my fear of being forgotten, unseen, unneeded, my desperation for validation disguised as ambition. I had been performing even in my private life, chasing relevance, chasing noise, chasing proof, as if silence meant disappearance, as if being unseen meant being unloved. That verse forced me to ask a harder question. What had I been remembering all this time? People's opinions, opportunities, outcomes, applause, everything except the one who sees without crowds. I started looking back at my life differently, not as a series of wins and losses, but as moments carefully placed, even the painful ones, moments that carried intention I had ignored. That's when the idea of Qadr stopped feeling abstract. I didn't see it as fate that limits you. I saw it as design that guides you, not punishment, but placement. Every closed door suddenly felt less personal. Every delay felt less like rejection. What I called bad timing started looking like protection. What I called loss started looking like redirection. I realized I had been arguing with reality for years, resisting outcomes I didn't choose, assuming peace would arrive once conditions improved, never considering that peace was independent of conditions. The hardships weren't unfair. They were uncomfortable, yes, but precise. They stripped away what distracted me. They exposed what I leaned on instead of Allah. I had been asking the world to give me what it couldn't. Stability, certainty, worth. I kept knocking on doors that were never meant to answer and blaming myself when they stayed silent. That verse didn't promise ease. It promised clarity. It showed me that forgetting Allah doesn't remove struggle. It removes meaning from struggle. For the first time, I stopped running from discomfort. I sat with it, listened to it, learned from it. I allowed myself to feel small without trying to escape it. And strangely, that's when I felt held. That moment didn't fix my life overnight, but it changed the direction of my attention. I stopped asking how to control everything and started asking who I needed to return to. In that stillness, something inside me finally loosened. Not because I had answers, but because I stopped demanding them. I wasn't fighting the quiet anymore. I was letting it hold me. What I found wasn't weakness, it was surrender, but not the kind that gives up. It was the kind that exhales and admits the truth. That I was never meant to carry everything alone. I began whispering a prayer I didn't rehearse. Oh Allah, I release what I can't hold. Not dramatically, not perfectly, just honestly from a tired place. For the first time, I accepted that control was an illusion. I had been gripping outcomes like they belonged to me, as if effort guaranteed results, as if willpower could replace wisdom. When I loosened that grip, I saw my past differently. Moments I labeled as failure softened. Detours I resented started to make sense. They weren't punishments, they were protection. The doors that closed didn't block me. They redirected me away from things that would have hollowed me out. What felt like delay was actually alignment. What felt like loss was space being made. There were seasons I felt completely abandoned, times when nothing moved, nothing answered. I thought Allah had stepped back from me. Now I see He was drawing me inward. That silence I feared so deeply changed its meaning. It stopped feeling empty and started feeling intentional, like a pause before understanding, like a place where distractions couldn't follow. In that quiet, I learned what Sabr really meant. Not gritting teeth and enduring misery, but waiting without resentment, trusting that timing carries mercy too. I stopped rushing conclusions, stopped demanding immediate clarity. I learned to sit with unanswered questions and let patience shape me instead of frustrate me. Tawakkul also changed in my hands. It wasn't passive hope or blind optimism. It was actively placing fear down and walking away from it, choosing trust even when certainty refused to show up. I noticed how often I returned to old habits, old doubts, old fears, old definitions of worth. That's when Tawbah became real to me, not as shame, but as return. It wasn't a single moment of repentance. It was daily, sometimes hourly. Realigning my heart when it drifted, admitting when I slipped back into control. Each return softened me, not weaker, clearer. I stopped trying to impress Allah with strength and started approaching Him with honesty. The more I surrendered, the lighter I felt. Not because life got easier, but because I stopped arguing with reality. I accepted that Allah's wisdom didn't need my approval. That's when transformation began to feel quiet and steady, not dramatic, not announced, just a deep internal shift, one that prepared me to finally live without forcing life to obey me. Now, when I speak about life, it doesn't come from what I've collected. It comes from what I've put down, not from titles or milestones, but from the weight I stopped carrying, from the things I finally let go of. I no longer measure my worth by how loud the response is. I listen more than I speak. I pause without fear. And I'm no longer desperate to be understood by everyone. I learned that humiliation from the world stings, but it fades. It bruises the ego, not the soul. But being humbled by Allah reshapes you completely. It softens places nothing else could reach. The world strips you to embarrass you. Allah strips you to heal you. One leaves you exposed, the other leaves you honest. Fame showed me how to perform on cue, how to hold attention, how to fill silence with sound. But hardship taught me how to sit with myself. It taught me how to notice what rises in quiet, what thoughts return when nothing distracts them, what fears I carry without applause to drown them out, and what faith feels like without an audience. The verse that shook me didn't shame me. It didn't tell me I had failed. It simply revealed what I had forgotten and invited me back. It reminded me that guidance doesn't shout. It waits. Patiently, gently, until the heart is ready to hear it. I finally understood who I was performing for and who I had ignored all along. The real audience was never impressed by polish, only by sincerity. No crowd ever knew my intentions. No applause ever measured my honesty. Only Allah knew what lived in my chest, and that awareness changed how I live. Now I choose stillness over noise, presence over approval, truth over comfort, and remembrance over distraction. I don't chase certainty the way I used to. I walk with trust instead. I allow questions to exist without panic. And I accept that not everything needs an explanation. When life tightens, I don't assume I'm being punished. I ask what I'm being taught. I listen for what's being removed. And I watch for what's being prepared. So my prayer is simple and quiet, that we all find a silence that doesn't scare us, a stillness where the heart finally listens, where we stop running from ourselves. May we stop mistaking applause for peace and start recognizing contentment when it arrives softly. May we seek acceptance where it truly matters, and may Allah make our hardest moments our deepest awakenings.